To business question, Angela Eagle.
Mr. Speaker, I wonder if the Leader of the House would give us the business for next week.
The House, Mr. Chris Grayling.
Well, thank you, Mr. Speaker. And if I can just start, I had the opportunity last night in our short debate to extend my congratulations to the Chairman of Ways and Means on his re-election. I wonder if I could also add my congratulations to the other two Deputy Speakers on their election. Mr. Speaker, the business for next week will be on Monday the 8th of June, second reading of the Scotland Bill. On Tuesday the 9th of June, second reading of the European Union Referendum Bill. On Wednesday the 10th of June, there is an opposition day, the first allotted day, on a subject to be announced by the opposition in due course. And I also expect my right honourable friend, the Prime Minister, to make a statement following the G7 summit. Now, I know last week the Shadow Leader was eager and indeed over-enthusiastic about Thursday's business, keen to find out what's happening. I can now tell her that it is indeed second reading of the European Union Finance Bill. On Friday the 12th of June, the House will not be sitting. Monday the 15th of June, consideration the first day, consideration in committee of the Scotland Bill. Tuesday the 16th of June will be the first day of consideration in committee of the European Union Referendum Bill. Wednesday the 7th of June, there will be a second opposition day on a subject to be announced in due course. And Thursday the 18th of June, it is the second day of the consideration in committee of the European Union Referendum Bill. Friday the 19th of June, Mr. Speaker, the House will not be sitting.
Eagle.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And may I thank the Leader of the House for announcing next week's business. I'd like to start by associating myself with the many tributes made yesterday to Charles Kennedy, who's died far too young. He was known for his wit, once quipping that Paddy Ashdown is the only party leader who's a trained killer, although, to be fair, Mrs Thatcher was self-taught. We will all mourn his passing. Mr. Speaker, I'd like to congratulate my honourable friends, the members for Crawley, North East Derbyshire and the honourable member for Epping Forest on their election and re-election as Deputy Speakers of this House. Members across the House will be relieved that their enthusiastic campaigning for support will now cease, although I will make no such promise to my own Labour colleagues. Mr. Speaker, I'm concerned that the Cities and Local Government Devolution Bill has been introduced first in the other place, despite its significant constitutional implications. This is against usual practice. Whilst we support greater devolution, we have real concerns about the impact of this on effective scrutiny of this bill. Can the Leader of the House set out why this decision was taken, and can he use this opportunity to assure me that he will guarantee that there is adequate time to scrutinise this bill properly when it finally comes to the Commons? Mr. Speaker, yesterday the Government published the 2014 League table for Ministers' replies to questions from MPs, and I'm beginning to wonder if it might help to explain the reshuffle. The Communities Secretary was the worst offender, and the Justice Secretary, the Right Honourable Gentleman, replied to just less than 2/3 of letters sent to him on time. Now, can the Leader of the House therefore set out what guidance he will be giving to himself on how he can improve his performance in this area? And can I suggest that members use the opportunity that business questions affords, because they're unlikely to get a written answer from him anytime soon? Mr. Speaker, it's less than a month since the election, and the facade of Tory unity is already beginning to crack. This week alone, the Defence Secretary has publicly warned the Treasury that he doesn't see the need for any more cuts to his department. The Secretary of State for Work and Pensions is reportedly infuriated at the Prime Minister's lack of clarity on child benefit cuts, an emotion we all shared after yesterday's evasive performance at Prime Minister's questions. And we've had complete chaos on human rights and on Europe, including a predictable call from the Right Honourable Member for Wokingham for an end to collective cabinet responsibility. And we've only been here 2 weeks, Mr. Speaker. We will debate the EU referendum bill next week, so I wonder if the Leader of the House would answer some straightforward questions. The Prime Minister has said repeatedly that he has a list of demands for Europe, but he won't tell us what they are. Can the Leader of the House set out when he will publish that list, and will treaty change feature on it? The Tories are split down the middle on whether to vote yes or no in the referendum. So are Cabinet Ministers going to be allowed to campaign to come out of the European Union and stay in their jobs? Last week, the Foreign Secretary said that leaving the European Convention on Human Rights was not on the table. Last October, the Leader of the House said that the UK should be prepared to withdraw. And yesterday, the Prime Minister said he ruled nothing out. So can the Leader of the House tell us who is right? The Prime Minister, the Foreign Secretary, or him? Mr. Speaker, this week saw the welcome departure of Sepp Blatter from FIFA. A leader past his best who just won an election but decided to quit. It's easy to see why the Prime Minister used to be such a fan. Now, Jack Warner, a former member of FIFA's Ethics Committee, which must compete with compassionate conservatism for oxymoron of the year, said Mr Cameron is a knowledgeable man, and I certainly trust his knowledge of football. Mr Speaker, that's news to me because I didn't think the Prime Minister knew his West Hams from his Aston Villas. Mr Speaker, this week we learnt of a serious security breach at the heart of government. Staff at Number 10 were alarmed as an unwanted visitor was seen roaming the corridors. And no, Mr Speaker, it wasn't the former Deputy Prime Minister trying to get back in. I'm told it was a heron. Perhaps it was fishing for a salmon, or a sturgeon, or even a grayling. Now, the incident gave rise to an interesting poll on the Daily Mirror website, which asked who would you rather lived in Number 10, a heron or the Prime Minister? The last time I checked, Mr Speaker, the heron was winning by 94-6.
The Leader of the House.
Well, Mr Speaker, the Honourable Lady started by making reference to her own deputy leadership contest. I have to say, it has been a matter of relief on her behalf this week to learn that her sister, the Honourable Member for Liverpool Garston, is supporting her campaign. As she knows, Labour leadership contests and siblings don't always go together well. So it is a matter of pleasure to know that Sunday lunches in the Eagle household can continue harmoniously. Of course, we've also seen this week the surprise entry into the Labour leadership contest of the Honourable Member for Islington North, who I'm sorry not to see in his place today. And I have to say, one of my colleagues did suggest to me, and I'm pleased to see him in his place, that perhaps that opened up an opportunity for the Honourable Member for Bolsover to stand in the deputy leadership contest as part of a joint ticket. However, Mr Speaker, we have seen this morning a new entrant. we have seen, Mr Speaker, today an interesting new development on the Labour leadership front with the news that the former Foreign Secretary is set to make a return to this country this autumn when he will be making a keynote speech at the conference of the Institute of Directors. Somebody once said, I wonder what he meant by that. Now, on the point she raised, the devolution bill. The devolution bill. Why in the other place? Well, Mr Speaker, I regard the other place as an extremely important part of our democratic process. It is important that it plays a prominent role in debating key issues in this nation. It is entirely right and proper that it should be scrutinising a bill of this importance. There is no shortage of crucial business in this House for the next 2 months. I am absolutely satisfied that it is the right thing to do, and I can assure her that when the time comes, there will be plenty of opportunity for this House to debate what is an extremely important measure and something this government is proud of. On the letters and PQs front, I would simply remind her that when I was first elected to this House in 2001, I have to say we didn't simply have a 5-day target. You could wait weeks and weeks and weeks before getting a reply from ministers from the other side. So I will take no lessons from them about their record in government in responding to this House. She talked about a Conservative Party unity, Mr Speaker. Well, last night, every single Conservative Member of Parliament eligible to vote voted in the first division of this Parliament. But, Mr Speaker, there were 15 Labour MPs missing. So where were they? And while we're on the subject of divisions, you might have noticed, Mr. Speaker, the rather interesting body language in the healthcare debate on Tuesday between two of the three candidates for the Labour leadership, trying very hard not to look at each other. And on the E-list, again, they talk about divisions. The Labour Party is the party that is all over the place on EU policy. We are united. We fought a general election on a platform of a referendum. We will hold that referendum. We also fought an election on a platform of scrapping the Human Rights Act, and we will scrap the Human Rights Act. But, Mr. Speaker, just to conclude by going back to where I started, the Honourable Lady's leadership campaign. She has produced a video to support her campaign. The soundtrack is that great Liverpudlian song, All Together Now by The Farm, which contains a particularly moving verse that might, in the current circumstances, be deemed a bit apposite. The same old story again. All those tears shed in vain. Nothing learnt and nothing gained. Only hope remains. The Labour Party today.
Order. As experienced members will know, it has been my usual, albeit not invariable, practice at business questions to try to accommodate everyone who wishes to take part. Unfortunately, given that well in excess of 50 honourable members wish to contribute in the subsequent debate, I fear today some members at business questions will be disappointed. However, in order to maximise the number of contributions, brevity from back and front benches alike is imperative. The tutorial on this matter will be led by Dr. Julian Lewes.
You always do this to me, Mr. Speaker. At this time of the year, when the thought of the D-Day landings is very much in our minds, may we have a statement from a Defence Minister on the position of defence in the nation's priorities?
Well, Mr. Speaker, my honourable friend is a powerful advocate for our armed forces in this place. Ministers, I know, always listen with great care to what he says. Of course, we will have defence questions next Monday, which will be the first of what are no doubt many opportunities for him to continue to articulate the importance and the heroism of our armed forces.
Forgive me, last intervention, I hope, from the Chair, but for the benefit of the House, I should emphasise that the third-party spokesman does have acknowledged rights on this occasion, as was the case when the Liberal Democrats were the third party. So I hope that there will be a proper forbearance and tolerance as I call and allow to develop his line of questioning, Mr. Pete Wishart.
For that, Mr. Speaker, I'm very grateful. Can I also pay my tributes to Charles Kennedy? I was with him the night of the tuition fees vote as we left the building through the back door as thousands of angry students descended on this house. And even though Charles hadn't voted for the tuition fees measure, he told me, Pete, if you fly with the crows, you get shot with the crows, and tonight you're with the crows. We made it to Waterloo Station, Mr. Speaker, I can safely account. But can I say to the Leader of the House, you don't know how excited we are on these SNP benches that the first piece of legislation we have on Monday is the Scotland Bill. And I'm very, very grateful to the Leader of the House that he's given us an extra day to improve this bill, because improvement it needs. And I think he knows it. I mean, what we want to see is all the Smith proposals in full, but we see that as a baseline, a very minimum of what we expect to improve this bill. And it's fantastic that we're getting such time, and it's the first piece of legislation in the House is getting more powers for Scotland. I hope he's listening to the many representations from the Scottish Government, and he accepts the mandate of the 56 out of the 59 SNP MPs as we go forward and try and improve this bill. But that's the way to do it. You bring a bill, you have first reading, second reading, long debate, long scrutiny. I just wish you'd do it for English votes, for English laws. Something with such significant constitutional implications. Not even a bill, the change in the standing orders. Can you tell us a little bit more what he intends to do with Ewell? Do we get to amend it? Do we get to scrutinise it? How is scrutiny going to be exercised? What about the House of Lords? There's 100 Scottish peers down there. Is it English votes for English Lords? It's where are we when it comes to this sort of thing? And when we come to the House of Lords, I noted in the Queen's speech that there's no discussion or debate at all about reform of the House of Lords. The only thing that the honourable gentleman wants to do is actually put more of his cronies and donors into the already overstuffed House. Ermine coated, never been voted. Let's get rid of the House of Lords. Almost 1,000 members in the House of Lords, and I think the public need some sort of reassurance that we're going to have some sort of reform when it comes to the House of Lords. And lastly, Mr. Speaker, We haven't yet had a departmental statement. We're almost 3 weeks into the House's business and there's been no departmental statement. And can I suggest that the first statement should be a clear statement about what this government intends to do in the Mediterranean crisis, with a willingness to play a bigger part in taking seriously its responsibilities, particularly when it comes to assisting refugees.
Well, Mr. Speaker, if I take that latter point first, of course, the Foreign Secretary was in this House earlier in the week. And there was plenty of opportunity for the honourable member to raise that particular issue with him, and indeed other issues related to international affairs. Can I associate myself as well with his comments about Charles Kennedy? His untimely death is a great loss to Scotland, and I think this House has shown itself at its best, cross-party, recognising the contribution that he made. With regard to the, well-advertised desire from the Scottish National Party for more powers for Scotland, what I would say to him is that the Scotland Bill, in the view of this government, delivers a major change for Scotland, a significant enhancement of the powers of the Scottish Parliament and the Scottish Government, that some of the arguments being made by the party over there simply don't add up. They want much greater power, they want full fiscal autonomy. They simply haven't addressed the fact that were they to do so, they would either have to choose between massive spending cuts in Scotland or substantial tax increases in Scotland, neither of which I think the Scottish people would wish. On the House of Lords, what I would say to him is I'd suggest that he sometimes goes down and has a listen to the quality of debate in the House of Lords. We have people with immensely important expertise in that place. They bring something to the quality of debate in Parliament, and I have to say that I disagree with him on his view of that House. But if I might finish, Mr. Speaker, by just referring to reports that I've seen today, and indeed rumours I've been picking up around this House, about the whole issue of the time at which members take their seats in the mornings. I understand that both Labour and Scottish National members are looking to come in earlier and earlier in the morning to secure their seats, possibly even earlier than 7 o'clock in the morning. It has, Mr. Speaker, been suggested to me that in order to accommodate that, a trolley service of breakfast might be provided to members in the chamber to enable them to come in that early. I would simply say I don't think that would be consistent with the traditions of the House.
Mrs. Maria Miller.
Mr. Speaker, new house building is an important priority for this government, and buying a new home can be the biggest purchase that most of our constituents will ever make. Can the Leader of the House make time for a debate to examine the quality of new house building and how the current system is working to expose substandard building companies who fail to deliver the quality of new build houses that we would all expect?
Well, Mr. Speaker, I do think this is a very important issue, and I would praise the work that my right honourable friend has done in her constituency, which has had a substantial amount of new housing built in recent years. And of course, those people who buy that housing and find themselves in possession of properties that simply aren't up to scratch go through an immensely difficult time. I would simply suggest to her she uses one of the mechanisms available to her, the adjournment debates, communities and local government questions when they come up, to keep making what is an important point and to make sure that message gets across to both government but also to the house builders themselves.
Mr. Kelvin Hopkins.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. At the time of the 1975 referendum on the in-out of the then common market, the Prime Minister at the time, Harold Wilson, very wisely agreed that his the Labour Party, would have a free vote on the in-out issue. I hope that wisdom will be observed by all parties when we come to make that decision again in future. But can I ask the Leader of the House whether he will be advising the Prime Minister and his Chief Whip to observe that wisdom in future?
Well, Mr. Speaker, I think this is very much a matter for the Prime Minister, but we're at the point where we haven't started the renegotiation, or barely started the renegotiation. We haven't even had second reading of the referendum bill yet, so I think these matters are for the future.
Rebecca Powell.
Mr. Speaker, the town of Wellington is in my constituency of Taunton Deane, and the famous Wellington Monument is prominent from the M5 as you go south. The town will be having lots of celebrations for their 200th anniversary, and I would like to ask the Leader if he might hold a debate to celebrate and discuss this wonderful anniversary, and perhaps he might find a little pot of money to restore the wonderful Wellington Monument, which is in so need of an upgrade.
Yeah. Well, Mr. Speaker, I hate to disappoint my friend, and I don't have a budget from which I could give her that small amount of money. But there will be many opportunities to lobby those are my colleagues who do have such a budget. I commend her for the work that she is putting into her own constituency in celebrating this great moment, this great anniversary of a great moment in our history, being celebrated in a whole variety of ways around the country, including the production by the Royal Mint of a celebratory coin, though I gather on the other side of the channel there has been some resistance to producing a euro coin to celebrate the same event.
Louise Haigh.
Speaker, does the Leader of the House share my concern about the news that the BBC is due to air a programme entitled Britain's Hardest Grafter, which has been dubbed the Hunger Games for the unemployed? And can we have a debate on whether the BBC is fulfilling its objective on airing programmes of quality and distinctiveness?
Well, I think the Honourable Lady makes an important point. It is certainly the case that challenges in our society should not be used to create show business opportunities. And so I would always ask all the broadcasters to approach the work they do on analysing life in this country and elsewhere with the utmost caution and sensitivity. She will have the opportunity either at the next, and she's just had one today, but there will be in a month's time another opportunity to raise that with the Secretary of State, and of course she can always ask for an adjournment debate on that subject.
Maria Caulfield.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Currently, my constituents in Lewes are experiencing severe acute rail delays and poor service, both due to Network Rail and the train operator, whether they be from Seaford, Newhaven, Lewes or Wivelsfield. Can the Leader make time for a debate to discuss these severe issues that are affecting all MPs in Sussex, to see if we can improve the service and also communications to rail passengers?
Well, Mr. Speaker, I have every sympathy with my honourable friend and her constituents. Of course, part of this is being caused by the necessary improvement works at London Bridge, an investment in the future that is absolutely vital, enormously beneficial in the end, but disruptive while it happens. But nonetheless, she is also aware that there have been some real issues around the services on the southern routes. They are something that the company itself needs to address, and I would urge her to raise that question again at Transport Questions next Thursday.
Mr. Keith Vaz.
Speaker, could we have an urgent statement next week on the plight of 25 British citizens who are trapped in Sana'a? The civil war in Yemen has cost so far 1,000 lives. Does he agree with me that there's an obligation to try and help our citizens in need, and could we have a debate on this very important issue?
Well, what I would say to the honourable gentleman, first of all, I share his concern about what is happening in Yemen. I'd say we have every reason for concern about events in many parts of the Middle East at the moment. It is an area of enormous challenge for the international community. He will, early next week, have an opportunity to raise this issue directly with the Foreign Secretary at Foreign Office Questions, and I would encourage him to do so.
Mr. Henry Smith.
Thank you very much. Can we have consideration of a debate on education funding? West Sussex is the second lowest funded area in the country, and yet there are many demographic pressures in constituencies like Crawley. I'd be grateful for that consideration.
Well, Mr. Speaker, I have every sympathy with what my honourable friend says, representing the next door county where there are also significant demographic pressures. We are going through a baby boom at the moment. Of course, these are tough times for the public finances, but I would encourage him to talk directly to the Secretary of State, who has proved very thoughtful and very receptive to discussing these issues with colleagues in areas that are affected.
Mark Williams.
Mr. Speaker, can I thank you for affording us the opportunity yesterday to make the tributes to the much-missed Charles Kennedy. As we move to the summer, can we have a debate on the case for reducing VAT on tourism, a policy pursued by all but 3 countries of the EU? It's been endorsed by 2 committees, select committees of this House in the last Parliament, and something which many regional and national economies of the United Kingdom would benefit immeasurably.
Well, Mr. Speaker, can I assure the honourable gentleman there will be such an opportunity. As the Chancellor has already indicated, there will, between now and the summer, be an additional budget statement, and he will have the opportunity at that time to raise these issues.
Tom Pursglove.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The contaminated blood tragedy is affecting families the length and breadth of Britain. Could we have a debate in government time on the difficulties that my constituents and other members' constituents are facing in trying to access appropriate treatment and support?
Well, Mr. Speaker, this is an issue that has affected constituents across this House. has been a matter of great concern to this government. It was something addressed by the Prime Minister and the Secretary of State in the last days of the last Parliament. I know the Department of Health is working carefully on this issue. I would encourage him to bring forward further opportunities either in Westminster Hall or here to discuss these issues, and also to continue to ask for updates from the Secretary of State at health questions.
Paula, Sherriff.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. May I request that a debate is held to address a promise made by the Chancellor just a few days prior to the election that constituencies such as my own in Dewsbury will be identified as enterprise zones within 100 days of the new Parliament. Many businesses in my constituency are struggling significantly and would undoubtedly welcome a period of zero business rates.
Well, the Chancellor of Exchequer will undoubtedly have taken note of her comments. I'll make sure his team are aware of what she says. Of course, we're not at the point of being 100 days into the new Parliament yet. But what I would say to her is that Dewsbury and indeed the whole area of West Yorkshire has benefited enormously from the economic progress we've made in recent years, with falling unemployment, more businesses being created. Of course, there is further to go. But this is, what we've seen is a real step in the right direction for the country and the area she now represents.
Philip Davies.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Can we have a debate on the deficiencies in the 2012 Legal Aid Sentencing and Punishment of Offenders Act? We may need 2 days to go through them all, but one particular pressing matter is the offence of threatening with article with blade or point or offensive weapon in this Act only applies when it happens in a public place or on school premises, and misses out many occasions when threatening with a knife takes place either in the home or on other private property. Can we make sure that this is amended as soon as possible to make sure that violent offenders are not escaping justice through a loophole that shouldn't exist?
Well, my own friend, as ever, makes an important point about crime and justice matters. I will make sure that my colleague, the Lord Chancellor, is aware of what he said. I'm no longer able to provide a direct solution to that. So as he knows, we share many views the same on criminal matters, but I'll make sure that the Minister of Justice is aware of what he said.
Stewart, Malcolm McDonald.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. The Leader of the House will be aware of a leak in the press at the weekend that HS2 Limited says there is no business case to take the project up to Scotland. We on this side of the House would welcome the opportunity to make that case to the Government. So can I ask the Leader of the House, in the spirit of his party's much vaunted one nation approach to politics, can we have an urgent statement on this very issue?
Well, Mr. Speaker, first of all, we regard HS2 as a crucial part of the future infrastructure of the United Kingdom. There has been no plan that I'm aware of brought before this House to change the plans we set out in the last Parliament, but he will have 2 opportunities next week to raise this issue, once in Scotland questions and once in transport questions, and I hope he'll take that opportunity.
Mr. Ian Littlegranger.
Speaker, could we please have time in this chamber to debate the situation to do with rural broadband? We are still not getting BT to full its weight. They are doing part of the work in constituencies across this country. They're not fulfilling their obligations or their contractual obligations. The time has come that this House needs to speak out on this matter and secure the future for rural people.
Well, Mr. Speaker, this is a matter that has been debated extensively in this House and will continue to be so, and I would encourage my honourable friend to keep raising this matter. His comments today will have been heard by the Department of Culture, Media and Sport. And of course we know we have a new Secretary of State who is a long-standing and experienced member of this House who doesn't take prisoners, as the BBC knows, and I've no doubt the BT will share the same experience.
Debbie Abrahams.
As my right honourable friend has just mentioned, the Secretary of State for Health announced in Liverpool this morning that the 18-week target for elective operations will be scrapped. Does the Leader of the House recognise that this shows absolute contempt for this House and for our democracy? Did he know about this announcement? And what is he going to do to ensure the accountability of the Executive to this country's elected representatives and in turn the people?
Well, I think it's important perhaps put on the record for this House that the Secretary of State has made no announcement today. The news story that has emerged has come from NHS England, from a senior official who has responsibility for the area under discussion. And whilst it is the responsibility of ministers to make statements for this House about decisions they personally take, where the NHS, as it is and has been argued for many years, has been put under the operational control of the experts who are best placed to run it, it is not for ministers always to announce the decisions that they take.
Dr. Andrew Murison.
Can we have a debate on the workings of the neighbourhood planning process contained within the 2011 Localism Act, the intent of which, of course, is to bring decision-making closer to communities? That does not appear to be happening in Warminster, in my constituency, and I would welcome an early debate on the matter.
Well, I listen carefully to what my honourable friend says. This is clearly a new development as part of that bill. It is designed to ensure that local communities have as strong a say as possible over the future development of their areas. I will make sure that my honourable friend in my right honourable friend in the DCLG is aware of the comments he's made, and I hope he'll take advantage of the system of adjournment debates to bring forward a debate on that matter as soon as he can.
Stephen Kinnock.
Park Slip open cast mine in my constituency has been closed for several years and is a dreadful scar on the landscape. Will the Leader of the House make time for a much-needed debate on the fate of open cast mines across the country?
Good question.
Well, Mr. Speaker, can I welcome the honourable gentleman to this House? I know he may have to do some additional campaigning elsewhere in the next few weeks. Having just finished one election, his family has another one to fight. What I'd say to him is I'm aware of the legacy of coal mining on the area he represents, and clearly of open cast mining itself. In a recent visit to the valleys, I was impressed at the way in which the hills are returning to nature in so many places, but he makes an important point about the impact of open cast, and I hope he will take advantage of the many opportunities available to him to bring a minister to the House or to raise an opportunity to raise a question directly with ministers at questions to make sure this issue is very firmly on the agenda.
Mr. Julian Sturdy.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. In welcoming the government's commitment to end many new subsidies for onshore wind farms, which have marched across Yorkshire like a plague of locusts in recent years, including a number of applications on greenbelt land in my constituency, can the Leader of the House provide a clear time frame for when these proposals will be implemented?
Well, Mr. Speaker, can I say that with the issue of onshore wind, one of the many reasons I'm delighted that we now have a Conservative government and not a Conservative government with Lib Dems attached is over this whole issue of onshore wind farms, which, in my view, have to be handled with the utmost care. And I know this is something my right honourable friend, the new Secretary of State, is looking at carefully. I will make sure his concerns are drawn to her attention, and I expect her to bring forward a new approach at an early opportunity.
Luciana Berger.
Speaker, further to the question from my right honourable friend from Leicester East, I and many other members of the House have received urgent pleas for help from British nationals in recent weeks who are stranded in the Yemen. I wrote to the Foreign Secretary about the matter in April and was informed that there are no plans to evacuate British nationals from the country. It is really heartbreaking to have to reply to these cries for help with such a response. Can we please have an urgent statement about what more the government can do to ensure a safe return of those British nationals stranded in Yemen and in neighbouring countries such as Djibouti, Saudi Arabia and Oman, as the situation remains extremely volatile?
Well, I absolutely hear what the Honourable Lady is saying. I will make sure that the Foreign and Commonwealth Office is aware of the concerns raised today. Ministers will, of course, be before the House on Tuesday, and I would encourage her to raise this issue very directly with them then.
Mr. Nigel Evans.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And you will know, Mr. Speaker, there are few more shocking or grotesque practices than supermarkets throwing away 50 million tonnes of food as waste every year. Today, the Chief Executive Officer of Tesco, Dave Lewis, has announced that Tesco will stop this practice and ensure that that food goes to charity. Could the Leader of the House arrange for a minister to come to this House and say what they are doing to ensure that if Tesco can do it, all the other supermarkets can do it, and this grotesque practice stops, and if they refuse to do it, that we will consider legislation as has happened in other countries?
Well, Mr. Speaker, I've listened to carefully what my honourable friend has to say. He is, of course, absolutely right. It is inexplicable and indefensible that good food should be thrown away. and he is absolutely right that the step taken today is a positive one. I will ensure that my colleagues who look after the charitable sector, my colleagues in the Cabinet Office, are aware of what he said. There will be an opportunity coming up shortly to raise that issue directly in questions, but I'll make sure before that happens that this message has got across to them.
Albert Owen.
Much. The Leader of the House will be aware that the Women's Institute are celebrating their centenary this year. He may be further aware that it was founded in the pioneering county of Anglesey. At Llanfair Pwllgwyngyll go get Wyn Drybydd Kansas City go go go.
Spell it. Say that.
I will help answer that later. Can we have a debate in government time on this very important organisation and the things that it's done at a local level, at a national level and international? And can he use his good office and the Speaker and the authorities to have an exhibition to this fine organisation?
Well, Mr. Speaker, I had no idea that the Women's Institute was founded in the village with the world's longest station name, which I visited last year, and I wouldn't even start to seek to pronounce it in the way that he clearly can and does so well. But I think we should all, as a House, collectively and across party, pay tribute to the Women's Institute for the work that it and its members have done over many decades for this country. They have been a backbone of our voluntary sector for a very long time. I was delighted to see their achievements celebrated at the Palace recently, and I would say to him this is a real opportunity for him to bring forward what would be an ideal subject for an adjournment debate.
Order with short, single-sentence supplementary questions and the continuation of the Leader of the House's exemplary brief replies. I don't say we'll get through everybody, but we'll make a pretty good stab at it. Mr Jason McCartney.
Mr Speaker, places of worship in Kirklees were targeted 132 times by thieves in the last 3 years, many stone thefts, and last night's scapegoat Hill Junior Infant School had tiles stolen from their roof just days after the scaffolding having previously had them stolen. Can we have an urgent debate on the scourge of stone thefts that are blighting our communities?
Well, Mr Speaker, I am very sympathetic to those who have experienced both stone and metal theft. We, of course, have legislated to tough the penalties for metal theft. And what I have done for the business community in my previous role is provide an opportunity for them to explain in detail to a court the impact of the loss of what might sometimes appear to be a small amount in value terms, but can be enormously important to the organisation involved. I would encourage him to bring forward, this is absolutely a subject for an adjournment debate, to bring a minister to this House to address this issue, but I would express my sympathies to those who have been the victims of that theft in the past 24 hours. And I would say that stealing from a place of worship is one of the most despicable crimes one can imagine in our society.
Gray.
I'm grateful, Mr Speaker. In light of the eye-watering projected costs and at a time of austerity, can the Leader of the House undertake to give a statement on the renovation on the Palace of Westminster and how members of this House and indeed members of the public, including my constituents in Airdrie and Shotts, can scrutinise the process?
Well, Mr Speaker, I should say to the House that an independent report into the condition of the building has been prepared. It will be made available in the next couple of weeks. There is an extensive discussion to have across this House and across both Houses of Parliament about how we respond to the needs and challenges. This is an iconic building. It is an enormously important building, not just for our democracy, but also for our nation as a source of tourist revenue from around the world. We should cherish it and look after it. We have to deal with the reality of fiscal austerity and challenging financial times, but I would be very, very reluctant indeed to see any step happen that left this building with an insecure future.
Mr Bob Blackman.
Speaker, many of my constituents have contacted me about a threatened neo-Nazi demonstration in the neighbouring borough of Barnet. Whilst I support freedom of speech, anti-Semitic hate crime is clearly completely unacceptable. Can my right honourable friend facilitate a statement by the Home Secretary about what action she is going to take to prevent such hate crime taking place that threatens the Jewish way of life?
Well, Mr Speaker, I'm happy to raise this issue with my honourable friend, the Home Secretary. I mean, let's be absolutely clear. Anti-Semitic crime is unacceptable in any way, shape or form in our society, and it should be dealt with the maximum toughness by our justice system, in the same way as anti-Islamic crime should be treated, and crime against any other religious group in our society. And I think he is right to make the point that whilst we as a society should cherish free speech that encourages hatred, encourages violence, will never be acceptable in our society.
That is Sherman.
Yeah, is the Leader of the House aware that thousands of children up and down our country suffering from special educational need and autism in particular cannot get assessed and cannot get treated? Or can we have a debate on that very soon? Yeah.
Well, Mr. Speaker, I think all of us, as members of Parliament, have probably had far more exposure and developed far more of an understanding of special needs since we were elected to this place. I certainly have. I certainly recognise the importance of getting it right. I know this is an issue of concern to the Education Secretary. She will be before this House in 8 days' time, or Monday week rather, in 10 days' time. I'm sure he'll take advantage of that opportunity to raise the issue directly with her.
Mr David Burrows.
Can the Leader confirm that Government Business next week has passed the family test and that family impact assessments will be published alongside legislation?
Well, Mr. Speaker, I think given the business next week is the European Union referendum bill on Tuesday and the Scotland bill on Monday, I think the family test is less central than it will be for some other measures. But I know that the Chief Whip and I will take note of what he said. Ministers across government should take note of what he says. Getting things right for families is absolutely central to protecting the fabric of our society, and we should always work to do so.
Steve McCabe.
Can we have an urgent debate on the government decision announced just hours after the general election to limit higher rate access to work support to those deaf people earning over £27,000? This isn't a cap on benefits, Mr. Speaker. It's a discriminatory cap on career opportunities for the deaf.
Well, Mr. Speaker, changes to the welfare system will, of course, come through as part of the legislation that will be laid before this House in the coming months, and he will have the opportunity, as will his party, to make their case when that time arises.
Chris White.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Following the successful introduction of video games tax relief announced in last year's budget, and the contribution this sector plays to our economy, not least in my constituency, can we have a debate about how we can assist video games industry grow further so that it is on equal footing with the UK film industry?
Well, Mr. Speaker, can I first of all pay tribute to my honourable friend for the work he's done in supporting this enormously important sector for our economy. This is an area where we are really world leaders and should work to continue to maintain that position. There are indeed many members of this House even who are enthusiastic participants in the work produced by the video games industry, Mr. Speaker. What I would say to him is that the Chancellor of the Exchequer will be in this House on Tuesday week. He, of course, will be preparing his budget, and there will be an opportunity to make representations to him over this issue.
Nick Smith.
Mr. Speaker, can we have a debate on pay for care home staff? Social services bosses say the system is in crisis. We need the very best staff to look after our older people.
Well, Mr. Speaker, I don't think anybody could disagree with that. And of course, it is really important that we have quality staff and quality support and quality service in our care homes. He will have many opportunities to raise this issue directly with ministers. And of course, in many cases, it's private companies, some of which are good, some of which are not good. And actually, as members of Parliament, we should always, when we come across them, seek to highlight poor performance in the care sector. It's one of the roles that we can play in ensuring that standards are raised.
Mr. Gareth Johnson.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I don't know if the Leader of the House has had the displeasure of using the Dartford crossing recently. If he has, then he would notice that the free-flow system there seems to have improved the flow of traffic. But the administration of that scheme through the DART charge has exasperated many of my constituents. Can we therefore have a debate, please, on the DART charge and the frustrations that my constituents are experiencing with that scheme, and also those people in the surrounding area?
Well, I understand the issues that my honourable friend and his constituents are facing. I myself have been a user of the DART charge on a number of occasions in recent weeks where, for reasons that I can't quite recall, I seem to spend quite a lot of time driving over to Essex, to places like Thurrock and Basildon, which are still represented by Conservatives. And so I absolutely understand what he's saying. Next Thursday will be an opportunity to raise that issue in transport questions with the Secretary of State. The scheme has the potential to make a real difference, but it needs to be got right.
Diana Johnson.
Mr. Speaker, in light of the publication of the Shrewsbury report on the baby ashes issue earlier this week, and the fact that this is an issue in many constituencies up and down the land, including in my own with the family of Mike and Tina Trohill. Can we please have a statement from the government about what assistance they will offer to local councils to carry out independent inquiries to find out what happened in local areas to baby's ashes?
Well, Mr. Speaker, this is an enormously sensitive issue. Our hearts go out to the families affected who've not only had to go through the trauma of the loss of a child, but also the aftermath that she describes. I know that my colleagues are carefully considering that report. It is something they will seek to deal with sensitively and appropriately, and will come forward with a response in due course.
Mr. David Nuttall.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Can we have a statement on what steps the government are taking to ensure that the welcome changes announced to stop nuisance phone calls are actually having an effect? It was quite apparent during the general election that this problem has certainly not gone away, and the continuing persistent unwanted phone calls are continuing to blight the lives of my constituents.
Well, Mr. Speaker, I absolutely agree with my honourable friend. Work has been underway to try and curb this. Of course, we're dealing with people who will constantly be looking for new ways to do this that are working around the law. I myself have been a victim of these calls. It always causes a bit of a shock when I was Secretary of State for Justice, when somebody phoned my mobile phone in one of these nuisance calls, and I informed them I was actually the Minister responsible for regulating the sector, and would they give me the name and address of their company. They normally hung up on the spot. But it is a serious nuisance. We must continue to work hard to address it, and I know my colleagues will do so.
Mr. Angus Brendan McNeill.
Mr. Speaker, a small but nevertheless important matter. Yet again, this place takes its summer break a month after midsummer, which coincides, accidentally no doubt, with English school holidays and then stretches long into autumn. Can we have a shorter parliamentary break, but coinciding with the Scottish, as well as, of course, the English school holidays, which would especially help all members with children and would help MPs get around summer events in their constituencies as well?
Well, Mr. Speaker, of course we will always seek to try and provide recess dates that work as well as possible for members across this House. What I would say, of course, is that when he talks about holidays, every Member of Parliament, of course, deserves a holiday, but to allow the narrative to continue that recesses are holidays is a disservice to this House. That is time that we all need to spend in our constituencies working on their behalf.
Let us see whether, with extreme self-discipline, we can accommodate everybody by 12:15, when I'd like to be able to move on. Mr. Graham Evans.
My honourable friend will be aware of the report of the failings of the M Street crematorium in Shrewsbury, where not returning babies' ashes to bereaved parents was published earlier this week. The report found that at least 60 families are believed to have been affected by these failures. Can we have a debate into the failings of the M Street crematorium and on the lessons what can be learned by local authorities to prevent this happening in future?
Well, Mr. Speaker, as I said a moment ago, this is an enormously sensitive and difficult issue, and one that we need to treat with enormous care and respect for the families involved. We will, as a government, respond in due course to this report. It's really important that we get it right.
Mr. David Anderson.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Can we have an urgent statement from the Secretary of State of Health on when young boys in this country who are suffering from Duchenne's muscular dystrophy can get access to the drug Translana? The drug is readily available across Europe, but it's being delayed in this country because of bureaucratic arguments within NHS England as a direct result of the health reforms. Can we have an urgent statement? The Prime Minister and the Secretary of State in the previous government guaranteed me and parents that this will be speeded up, and it's still being held up today.
Well, Mr. Speaker, I know this issue has already been raised with ministers this week. I know that they will take very seriously the views of members. I will also make sure that his concerns are once again passed on to my colleagues in the Department of Health today.
Mr. Andrew Turner.
Mr. Speaker, there is troubling example of poor development in an area of outstanding natural beauty in my constituency. Could my right honourable friend consider finding time for a debate on the subject, and in particular whether there should be restrictions on the use of retrospective planning permissions in AONBs and AONBs?
Mr. Speaker, I'm always very concerned when I hear about planning going wrong in the way I suspect that has done in my honourable friend's constituency. Might I suggest it might be most helpful to ministers if he could produce a short summary of what's gone wrong and pass it to them, because that will enable them to look at the regulations and see if anything needs to be changed.
Flynn.
The House was at its best yesterday, but also at its worst. in another degrading spectacle of Prime Minister's question time, which was an exchange of insults and non-responses. Can we debate Early Day Motion 51 that seeks to reinvent the format for question time that will retain the robust questioning but be carried out in an atmosphere of calm and mutual respect?
Well, Mr. Speaker, I think one of the things that makes this one of the great debating chambers of the world is that there is lively debates between the two sides. And I would never condone insults across the House, but I think we would lose something in this Parliament if we didn't have a vigorous and sometimes challenging debate of the kind that we see regularly.
Mr. Martin Vickers.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The Queen's speech contained reference to the subsidies for onshore wind turbines, a reduction in them. This has caused some uncertainty amongst businesses that serve my local community who deal with offshore wind. Could we have an early statement to reassure them that there is no uncertainty about continuing subsidies for the offshore renewable sector?
Well, Mr. Speaker, I will draw my own friend, the Energy and Climate Change Secretary's attention to the concerns he's raised. I know that the prime concerns on this side of the House are about protecting our countryside and ensuring that onshore wind is handled in a sensitive way. I'll ask her to address the issues he's raised.
This is Mary Glindon.
Mr. Speaker. Together with the Honourable Member for Waveney, I've contacted the new Secretary of State for Energy to ask her to continue with the successful cross-party oil and gas industry promotion group, which had notable achievements in the last Parliament. Can I urge the Leader of the House to speak to the Secretary of State and ask her as a matter of urgency to make a positive decision on this request?
I've noted the Honourable Lady's comments, and I'll make sure that my right honourable friend is aware of her concern.
Mr. Jeremy Lefroy.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. My thoughts and those of my honourable friend for Staffordshire Moorlands are very much with those seriously injured at Alton Towers in Staffordshire, and we would like to praise the community first responders who were so quickly on the scene. Can we have a debate about community first responders, in particular the issues regarding markings on cars that he knows about, because they are causing great concern to my constituents and hers?
Well, Mr. Speaker, I have been aware for a long time of the fine work done by first responders in his constituency. In a past role in opposition, I made a number of visits to the Staffordshire Ambulance Service and learnt about the work done by first responders. And clearly this week was a moment at which that work was enormously important. And I think all of our hearts go out to the young people affected in that tragic accident. We wish them all the very best for their recovery. I would praise all of those who were involved in the rescue efforts. I hope all the lessons that can be learned are learned. And I would encourage him to use the Westminster Hall or the end-of-day adjournment debates to find an opportunity to put on record the importance of the work done by first responders, and also to make sure ministers are aware of the issues to which he draws this House's attention today. I'm also aware of them. I also believe they're very important.
Valerie Vaz.
Mr. Speaker, my 82-year-old constituent was refused a blue badge despite having it for the last 10 years and a progressive condition. Could we have an urgent statement and a review of the blue badge guidance to stop this unfairness?
Well, Mr. Speaker, the blue badge guidance always has to be fairly tight in order to ensure that people can't abuse the system. But of course, one of the things that we can all do as constituency members of Parliament is challenge the local authorities when they get it wrong. It's something I've done in the past. It's something I know that she will do now to ensure that the right decision is taken.
Mr. Mark Spencer.
Thank you. The Leader of the House may be aware that Thoresby Colliery will close in July this year. Could he encourage the Secretary of State for Business, Innovation and Skills to come to the Chamber to make a statement to the measures that will be put in place to assist those employees in retraining and reskilling so they can move on to jobs elsewhere?
Well, Mr. Speaker, there is extensive support now available across government for those unfortunate enough to be caught up when a business closes, whether it's through Job Centre Plus, whether it's through the work done in the business department in skills development. My right honourable friend will be in this House in a couple of weeks' time. I would encourage my honourable friend to raise these issues at that point, but also to go directly to the department now and make sure that the teams there who can help in these matters are ready and available when the change comes.
Mr. Andrew Slaughter.
Speaker. The Leader of the House's views on human rights law and conventions are at least clear. He's against them. But could he clarify the Prime Minister's view, which has moved this week from support for the European Convention, reportedly, to now contemplating leaving the Convention? Can we, in the absence of a bill, have an early statement or debate so we can explore the full range of the Tory party's views on this matter?
Well, Mr. Speaker, this government's and the Conservative Party's policy on human rights has not changed since last October. What we don't know is where the Labour Party stands, because on the one hand, they will say they want to defend the human rights legal framework as it is. When it comes to the issue of prisoner voting, they will line up and say they don't want to give votes to prisoners. Those two are not compatible. They need to decide where they stand, because at the moment they are all over the place.
Mr. Oliver Colville.
Mr. Speaker, in September 2014, the Conservatives gave a commitment that we would scrap the 15-year rule for British expats to be able to vote in elections. Can I ask what progress has been made and what the timetable is to make sure this happens?
Well, Mr. Speaker, this is a clear manifesto commitment. It is something we will deliver at an early date. I can't give my honourable friend an exact timetable today, but I can assure him that it is in our plans and it will happen sooner rather than later.
Mr. Stephen Hepburn.
Will the Leader of the House secure an urgent early debate on the future of NHS walking centres, which were opened by a Labour government and a quarter of which have been closed by this government? The one in Jarrow is due to close through an unaccountable management. 27,000 people are going to be dumped on local, already overburdened GP surgeries.
Well, Mr. Speaker, of course, the honourable gentleman has had the opportunity already this week to raise this matter in the health debate that took place on Tuesday. What I would say to him is that under this government we have already increased spending on the health service. We are committed to spending a further £8 billion extra on the health service. We are as yet uncertain what his party's policy is.
Stewart Andrew.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. My right honourable friend will be aware of the flawed review into children's heart services during the last Parliament, and whilst much of can be welcomed in the new review, there is still the omission of access to units as one of the standards, which is raising concerns. Can we have a statement or a debate as soon as possible so we can make sure that this review is first rate this time?
Well, Mr. Speaker, can I first pay tribute to my honourable friend for the work he has done on behalf of his constituency and on behalf of West Yorkshire on this deeply sensitive matter. I think the concern he's shown over this is typical of the approach he's taken as a constituency MP and one of the reasons he was so successfully re-elected to this place. What I would say to him is that there will be many opportunities in the coming days to requisition debates to get ministers to come and address these issues either in Westminster Hall or in here, and I suggest he takes advantage of those opportunities.
Bridget Phillipson.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The Government announced a bus bill to allow some local areas to refranchise services. In Tyne and Wear, we already have similar plans underway that ministers have consistently failed to back. Can we have a statement from the Department for Transport about what implications, if any, there are of this planned legislation on our existing proposals?
Well, of course, the bus bill is going to be an important part of our devolution plans. We will be bringing forward that measure in the near future. She will have an opportunity next Thursday in Transport Questions to raise the issue very directly with the Secretary of State, and I'm sure she'll take advantage of the opportunity to do so.
Mr. Philip Holloway.
Could we have a debate on the importance of local arts festivals? This forthcoming weekend sees the first ever Ket Fest, which is a spontaneous celebration of local arts, culture and music in the town of Kettering itself. While supported by the relevant local authorities, it's only drawing, quite rightly, on a minimal level of public funding, and its success will be almost entirely due to the individual initiative, enthusiasm and endeavour of a large number of public-spirited individuals who are proud of the town in which they live.
Well, Mr. Speaker, I know that Kettering is a town that has a very strong community spirit, and what he describes is this country at its best, when it is people who come forward and deliver change or deliver events that really bring communities together. It is great to hear of such a good example, and also great to hear of an example that is not simply dependent on public finance to deliver real community togetherness.
Margaret Ritchie.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. Would the Leader of the House give some consideration to a statement on the issue of submarine activity in the Irish Sea, which has already interfered with fishing effort, the latest incident being the 15th of April, which destroyed the fishing gear and the boat of one of my constituents?
Well, I do understand the concerns about this and the concerns in the fishing community about this issue. Could I just say to her that Defence Questions is on Monday, and she will have an opportunity in topical questions then to raise this issue if she chooses to do so. And of course there will be other opportunities during the course of the summer.
Mr Peter Bone.
Mr Speaker, one of the unintended consequences of the general election was that we have a gap now in question time. There is no need for Deputy Prime Minister's questions. Now, there has been a minister who sat silently on the bench, the front bench, a very talented minister who has a lot to do with the running of this House. Could we have a statement from the Leader of the House instituting a question time in future for the Chief Whip? And then we could ask him how he united the Conservative Party over Europe and how he got every single Conservative person through their voting lobby and how he's had no rebellions.
Mr Speaker, my honourable friend is absolutely right to praise the Chief Whip, who has made a brilliant start to his job. I have to say I would have been slightly worried if he'd had a rebellion in his first vote. I have to say there is a long tradition in this House, only occasionally broken, of Chief Whips simply getting the job done rather than advertising what they're doing. And I suspect that my right honourable friend will prefer to keep things that way than to change the practice of the Chief Whip remaining a silent participant in the House.
Mr Andrew Gwynn.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. Can the Leader of the House now answer the points made by the Shadow Leader in respect of the City's devolution bill? Because there were a great number of members on both sides of the House, from Greater Manchester, Birmingham, Liverpool, Leeds and Hull, who wanted to speak in yesterday's oversubscribed debate on the issue of devolution to the cities and regions within England. There's clearly a great demand, and it's doing this House a disservice to start the bill at the other end.
Well, Mr Speaker, to start off with, I think it may be appropriate to wish the honourable gentleman a happy birthday today. Can I say to him that, of course, there is an opposition day next week. The subject of that debate has not been announced yet. A couple of members opposite have expressed an interest in discussing these issues. There is an ideal opportunity for them. They should speak to the Shadow Leader.
Mr Wayne David.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. Later this month, the Government will receive a report from the Electoral Commission on the completeness of the electoral registers in preparation for full implementation of individual electoral registration. Can we have a report and have a debate in this House on that very subject, please?
Well, Mr Speaker, first of all, on the issue of the new approach to electoral registration, I believe it has been absolutely the right thing to do. We are a society and a democracy that prides itself on being clean and free from fraud. That has not always been the case in recent years, and the reform, in my view, takes us a step towards having a fraud-free system. The House will, of course, have the chance to study the report from the Electoral Commission when it comes, and he will be able to bring forward the issues when he chooses to do so.